So Jake Paul has lined up Hasim Rahman Jr. as a replacement opponent for Tommy Fury, who, as I'm sure all of you know by now, wasn't able to go through with their fight for a second time, this time ostensibly because he was denied entry into the United States due to this Kinahan investigation. Now, I have actually seen Hasim Rahman Jr. fight a couple times before, and to say that I was less than impressed would be an understatement. He is not very good at all. Okay, now, he is 31 years of age, and realistically, if you haven't done anything at all, literally haven't beaten anyone as a professional fighter at 31 years of age, you're probably not going anywhere. Now, it is a little bit different in the heavyweights because heavyweights tend to have a longer shelf life and what have you. But if a welterweight is 31, like for example, Blair Cobbs, he's in his 30s. And when he came onto my radar, I was like, well, this guy's not going anywhere. How can you be in your 30s and you haven't beaten anybody of note, anybody with a pulse? Do you know what I mean? So before I'd even watched him fight, I'd written him off. And indeed, based upon what I saw in his last fight, I was right to do so. But with Hasim Rahman Jr., I have actually seen him fight a few times. And the fact that he's 31 already, to me, is just indicative of the fact that he doesn't have enough time to improve, to actually make himself into something. So I've seen him fight a few times, and I saw his last fight against James Mackenzie Morrison, who is actually the son of the late Tommy Morrison, and he got knocked out in that fight. He was boxing okay, I guess. It was a competitive fight. The judges actually had him ahead on all the scorecards. I wasn't scoring it, but I did watch it. In fact, shout out to Tebow, because he sent me, well, he told me about the fight. He didn't send me the link. I don't think he sent me the link, but he told me about the fight. And then I went and looked up the fight because he told me about it right after it happened. I watched it and I was like, wow, Hasim Rahman Jr. is just as poor as last time I saw him. And then he gets beaten, gets stopped. So yeah, not a good fighter, but Jake Paul is a YouTuber. Jake Paul's a guy who had one amateur fight or two amateur fights against other YouTubers, and then he turned professional. So this is still a test without a doubt for Jake Paul, and he should be commended for taking on this guy, because not only is this guy someone who does have an amateur background and obviously comes from a boxing family. There you go. Some of his amateur fights obviously lost a lot because, like I told you, he's not very good. But he does come from a boxing family. His dad was former world heavyweight champion, fought in the amateurs plenty of times. He's got more professional fights than Jake Paul. And the biggest thing here is that he's much bigger than Jake Paul. He's a heavyweight, 224 pounds. He's not a big heavyweight, but, he's fluctuated between the low 230s down to as low as 211 in 2018. I mean, that's really a cruiserweight, isn't it? A big cruiserweight, or even a bridgerweight. That's what Hasim Rahman Jr. is. So he's a big man for Jake Paul. So I commend Jake Paul for taking it, particularly at such short notice, although the short notice thing is kind of like a Mayweather tactic. Not that this is a tactic, right? Because Tommy Fury pulled out. But Mayweather would often not announce who he was going to fight up until about a month, sometimes 5 weeks before the fight. And this, many people believe, was done deliberately by Mayweather to give his opponent as little time as possible to actually prepare. So he's been in the gym for 8-10 weeks preparing, and he knows who he's going to fight. He's already picked the opponent in his mind, but he only tells the opponent, let's say a month before the fight or 5 weeks. Do you know what I mean? So that it gives him some type of advantage in theory. This is what people believe about Mayweather. I don't think anyone really ever proved it, but this is what a lot of people believe about him. And so, not that Jake Paul intended for that to be the case here with Hasim Rahman Jr., but it's possible that it will work out like that because, again, Hasim Rahman Jr. surely didn't expect to get this opportunity. Now, they do have history. Apparently, there's a video. Not sure if it's on this page or a different page, might be on a different page. But there's a video of Hasim Rahman Jr. In fact, I think I can press play here. I'm not going to do it for copyright reasons, but there's a video of Hasim Rahman Jr. and Jake Paul in the ring, either before or after a sparring session, and they're talking smack to each other. And Hasim Rahman Jr. seems very riled up and very upset. And, he's saying he's going to do this, that, and the other to Jake Paul. I don't know whether that was even genuine, to be honest. I don't know whether that was just, obviously things do get heated in sparring. But when you're dealing with a YouTuber like Jake Paul, you're wondering how much of this stuff is contrived in order to get attention, because he's been doing that for years. That's how Jake Paul became famous in the first place, was by making YouTube videos. And a lot of the scenarios, I have to imagine, were contrived scenarios. So was that situation with Hasim Rahman Jr. contrived in terms of the beef and the smack talk, or was that just something they did for clout on, to get attention on social media and what have you? I don't know. But that is the opponent that Jake Paul has lined up. And as long as it's not a Mickey Rourke fixed fight type situation, and by the way, I don't think that the Jake Paul Woodley fight was fixed. A lot of people are saying I don't think that was fixed at all. That was a genuine knockout. And there isn't any of Jake Paul's fights that I've seen thus far that look fixed to me. They all look like genuine fights. So I hope that's the case here with Hasim Rahman Jr. And if it is, like I say, credit and kudos to Jake Paul. I'm sure that he gained a lot of confidence from sparring him, and that's one of the reasons that he's chosen him as a late replacement opponent. But it's different in the ring with 16 or 18 ounce gloves, in the gym, rather than in a professional fight with little 10 ounce gloves on against a heavyweight. It's different. So that's my take on it. Give me your take in the comments section below.